Hello and welcome to Your Favourite Teacher. Today I'm going to introduce Language Paper 2, which seems to be everyone's nemesis because it has not one but two sources. Now, Language Paper 2 is non-fiction. Non-fiction texts are ones which refer to reality. They aren't like the fiction extracts which you have examined in Paper 1 that are stories and have been made up for someone's entertainment at some point. So non-fiction texts include the following. It might be forms of communication, letters, emails, it could be magazines, newspapers, it might be adverts, reviews, biographies. It's a long list, and basically you don't need to remember them all, but you just need to make sure that you can recognise a few key features. So for example, a letter has a sign off at the end and an article will have a title, just things like that. The first thing you need to identify when reading your sources is the PAF, okay? So that's the first thing is then the purpose, the audience, and then the format. So the purpose of the text is the reason why it was created. So instructions for your new, your iPad, those were written to guide you through a process in a clear, simple way. They don't use any figurative language, telling you to grasp the cable and dance to the gaping cavity in the laptop's sinewy base. Instead, it will say insert cable into USB port. So it's very clear, concise, easy to follow because that's its purpose. The purpose of instructions aren't to persuade or entertain you. They're to explain and inform you of a process. If you've got a text being sent from a university student to their parent with a plea for money, you might find hyperbole. So they might say that they are literally dying of starvation. And that's because they're writing to persuade their mum of something. There's an end goal. So inform, explain, advise and persuade are some common purposes. And we also have describe, argue and review. So these are our purposes, and when you're reading your source, identify what the purpose of the source is and just pop it at the top of the exam paper so you have a constant reminder of what the writer's trying to do. Basically, knowing what the writer is trying to achieve is half the battle, because you need to know what they're doing in order to justify how they're doing it. For example, it would be no use just identifying that a politician uses loads of statistics and rhetorical questions in their speech about gun control. You need to recognise that these are devices that help persuade the audience that the harmfulness outweighs any infringement on the Second Amendment. Excuse that Americanism there, that was just an example, but you catch my drift. Oh, which coincidentally is a metaphor to help unite you, the audience, with me, the host. So, this brings me on to the A in our PAF. Yes, we've only covered purpose. A is for audience. In this instance, the audience isn't just obviously a bunch of people sat in a theatre. It's whoever's accessing the non-fiction, so who it's aimed at. And it's important to think who the text is written for, as it will affect how it's been written. So audiences can be broken down into groups, and writers use stereotypes, rightly or wrongly, to try and influence the group. So some traditional stereotypes or examples might be that someone would use pink colours and images of unicorns if you're targeting young girls for something. Or they might use super fast sports cars if you're targeting businessmen. Now, there's no rule to suggest young girls aren't going to be enticed by fast cars or businessmen by unicorns, but social conventions and trends work based on certain assumptions. And that's important to remember. So when targeting an audience, the writer will have considered their needs and their interests, and some of these groups might be parents, pensioners, people of a type of profession, so they might target doctors or teachers. It depends. If you've got a leaflet from the Department of Education, it's going to be going towards parents and teachers and headmistresses, whereas something on sanitation in hospitals might be targeted at the NHS. So there's an infinite number of groups. You could a group of, well, all of the Man United supporters, they are a target audience. So you have to make assumptions about how they're going to behave, the things that they're going to be interested in. They're not going to be interested in buying a Liverpool birthday cake, okay? Because that just goes against all that they believe in. So you also need to consider the time period of the source. And in your exam, you won't just have a modern source. You can have a modern source and a much older text. And the older texts are harder. They'll often seem much more formal. The sentences might be longer and the vocabulary is slightly unusual and old-fashioned. And it will take you a while to get your head around what this purpose is and what the audience is, because you won't be as used to seeing them. So we've covered the purpose and the audience, and the last thing is the format, and the format is just the type of text the source is. So common things to expect might be articles, speeches, letters, reviews, adverts, biographies, and you need to think about what style of writing suits these. So obviously with these sources that you get in the exam for your section A, it will be clear if there are titles or bullet points, but when you're doing your writing section, remember that you're going to be asked to produce a style of writing, so you need to consider the purpose, the audience and the format of your piece, and it's worth 40 marks, so give it good consideration and be aware that if they're asking you for a certain thing, there'll be certain expectations. So don't worry, obviously, if they ask you for a newspaper article, they aren't expecting you to write it in columns, so please don't try. But it will be nice for you to have considered, a title perhaps of your piece, and whether it is going to be an informative piece or if it is going to be a persuasive piece. That will probably be obvious in the question. So it's just an overview of non-fiction and the purpose, audience and format. And I'll do a few more podcasts over the next few days to help you through the language papers. Good luck.